Hello, coming to you live from IHOP. Well, not exactly. We were live at IHOP about 2 hours ago. Anyways, this is the Saluki Gamescast, episode 79 for Friday, April 26th. My name is Justin Young. Joining me as usual are Alicia and Mario. Christina is still out, but hopefully be back next week for the show and everything. Alicia, Mario, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I don't really know how to describe the week. It was a little bit of a blur. I think it's just getting to I guess, that time of the semester where it's all catch up right now. There's no caught up. It's just continuous catch up.
The thing I always find is it's not just like, oh, I'm behind on this one class. I'm behind on every class. And then also I'm behind on like doing laundry and cleaning the house.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not academic stuff. You end up behind on everything.
I haven't cooked dinner for myself in however many number of days. It's just like...
Are you eating, Mario?
I am eating.
I literally was telling my therapist yesterday, I was like, Saturday is going to just be me cleaning the house, and Sunday is going to be just me sitting, and I'm not going to care about any other consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I realize when, like, Gizmo comes to me, he's like, you know, hey, dude, like, you should be petting me. And I'm like, have I not petted you today, Gizmo? And like, he may be lying to me because cats are manipulative, but, you know, I am fairly certain a lot of the times that I am just forgetting basic things that I should be doing. And I don't think it's entirely that I'm getting old. I think it's also just life catches up with you. We should talk about the fact that and I would say 70% due to Alicia. This morning we all went to eat at the International House of Pancakes. The only, like, obviously International House of Pancakes. There can only be one location of that, located here in fabulous Carbondale.
In the end, there can be only one.
And so we went there for breakfast. Christina did join us for that. And it was specifically because they were having a promotion with Sonic-themed breakfast meals.
And one lunch meal.
I was going to say, and one lunch. The Knuckles meal was the chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
I thought about it. I was like, oh, that chicken sandwich sounds good, but it's 8:30 in the morning.
Do you feel bad if you eat, like, lunch food for breakfast?
No, but I think I would have felt bad going to a place, specifically a breakfast place,
A pancake
specifically
place.
a pancake breakfast place,
Well,
and getting a chicken sandwich.
Would they have even made it for you that early?
I
Because most
don't know.
restaurants are like, no, we don't start making lunch until 10:30 or whatever.
The grills are strictly for pancakes at this time of day.
The real chaos is when you go to the places that just serve everything all day. It's like,
The real chaos is those pancakes.
the chaos control, the chocolate pancakes.
but
Sorry.
I mean, like, if you go to Cracker Barrel at like 8 o'clock at night, Cracker Barrel is like, yeah, we'll serve you breakfast. And you're just like, oh, so it's just anything at any time of the day.
I do think it's less chaotic when places still serve breakfast for dinner than when they serve it, but it's more chaos when they serve like lunch and dinner food at breakfast.
I think I would agree with that because that's like a quirky thing to do, right? Oh, we're having breakfast for dinner, but like you can't have like
You don't have a
Thai
cheeseburger.
curry for like breakfast. I mean, you probably could, and that would be awesome.
But like even when
Thai
you're
curry
having,
for breakfast 2024.
Yeah, even when you're having like leftovers though, like you don't really have like
Except pizza.
cold
Cold pizza,
You can do
it can-
cold
it can
pizza,
do
but like you
breakfast.
don't do like a cheeseburger or like spaghetti for breakfast.
I don't know. Spaghetti sounds pretty good. Like, first thing I wake up in the morning, there's a big plate of spaghetti with some Parmesan cheese on it. That sounds pretty good. Like, I'd be in a good mood. Like, that's better than a Pop-Tart.
I mean, you're not wrong, but also it's chaotic.
Only because it hasn't been done yet, right? Everything is chaotic until it becomes the norm.
I mean, there is that danger, right? That these meatballs are going to roll down and off the plate and onto my lap and across the floor. So, like, that's chaos, right? Like, there's a whole song about that. On top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese.
Oh man, I have not thought about that song in years.
I also do think that it depends on the places that serve anything all day long. I think it depends on the place and it depends on the time of day that you go in.
Right.
Like Denny's is a place you should only be when it's dark outside. But like
is that because of the vampires?
no, it's because if you're at a Denny's when it's light out, something's gone wrong. Denny's is a place to only be eaten at between the hours of like 11 p.m. and 3 a.m.
If it's not 2 a.m. and you just got done striking a show with all the theater nerds and you're at Denny's, what's wrong?
I gotta be honest, like my high school days make me feel the same way about Steak and Shake.
Okay.
Steak and Shake is the place you go late at night, like because it was one of the only places open 24 hours, like growing up. So like if you were out with your friends and you wanted a milkshake at 3 a.m, which you do, you go to Steak and Shake. But it was that in Denny's, right? Like those were the two 24-hour places. So when you've made bad choices in life, why hasn't Denny's ever just embraced that as their slogan?
We're here for you. We know you don't want us to be, but we're here.
Look, you don't want to be here. We don't want to be here. But we both made bad choices in life.
What is that? What is that? Paul Rudd from the meme from the chicken. Like, look at us. Who'd have thought? Not me.
Nobody thinks they're going to be working or eating at Denny's at 3 a.m.
Oh, man.
Everybody's Paul Rudd at 3 a.m. at Denny's.
So like this kills me because like I said this earlier, like the Denny's in my hometown is really good. And like, so I think of Denny's as being like good. And then I go to literally any other Denny's and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why you're a joke. This is why you're only for the crazy theater kids at 3 a.m.
I mean, I've eaten at a decent Denny's before, so I'm not going to like bash Denny's as like terrible, but like Denny's is, you're absolutely right, is that place that you're eating after dark because like the vampires are out then.
I have no room. Like that's the place that I ended up the night before my cousin's wedding. A couple weeks ago, we were out drinking the night before, and we ended up at Denny's. And so it's like it was across the street from the hotel.
Then you need all that breakfast food to like soak up the alcohol, right? Like to absorb it, so you don't have a hangover in the morning. So Denny's, so you don't have a hangover in the morning.
My gosh.
I feel like we could just handle all of Denny's marketing. They should just embrace it. Like that is who they are.
Well, it's like it was like that's one of the things that like Jack in the Box did, like the Munchies meals that you could only get like after 9 p.m. or something like that. It's like, and it was like these Frankenstein combinations of foods as well. Like it was like this is not something that like you could ever order off of the menu, but we've combined like the chicken sandwich, a hamburger, and a hash brown, all put it on a sandwich because we know that's what you want to eat right now.
Look, you've already made bad choices. What's one more? Also a great slogan for Denny's.
Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, look, I love breakfast. Like breakfast food is maybe my favorite food. I would probably go and like I'm the sort I'll go at 8 o'clock at night and order breakfast somewhere because like it's tasty food. So I'm not going to bash it. We should probably actually talk about the food we actually ate
at IHOP, not Denny's.
Right, since we just spent 20 minutes discussing Denny's.
IHOP was like, what's Denny's again?
This episode is sponsored by IHOP, but the next one will not be.
IHOP's literally out here like, we did the video game promotion. What went wrong? Even the video game podcast isn't talking about us enough.
Also a good slogan for Denny's. What went wrong? Exactly in that tone. What went wrong? We know what you're asking when you come into Denny's.
Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh.
When our first question to customers is not, what would you like to drink? It's what went wrong?
It's not a how many of you. It's a, all right, well.
Oh my gosh.
So, anyways, IHOP actually had these Sonic the Hedgehog themed meals, which I guess maybe is a tie-in with the Knuckles series, though nothing on the promotional material said anything about that series.
No, the only thing that made Knuckles special was, again, that was the one lunch item.
But it's really weird, like, to do this tie-in for a limited time, and it's not tied to the Knuckles series, it's not tied to the movie, right? Like, I understand it's harder with a game because games can slip in their release date and everything. But the series and the film, they knew those were coming out. Like, wouldn't you try to tie it? It seems weird.
I feel like they announced it when something dropped for Sonic Prime on Netflix.
Well, maybe.
I feel like it was tied into that.
Maybe it was tied to the promotion of the cartoon. So anyways, they had, what was it, 6 meals? So
Yeah.
it was Tails, Sonic, Knuckles, Dr. Robotnik,
Yeah.
Amy, and
Shadow.
Yeah, it was the Tails 2x2x2, Sonic's Blue Blur Special, Knuckles Chicken Sandwich. Of course, Knuckles doesn't get any like fun name there. Dr. Eggman's Benedict, Amy's Sweet Strawberry Delight, and Shadow's Chaos Chocolate Pancakes.
Yeah, that is Knuckles. It's a chicken sandwich. What do you want?
I mean, it feels, I guess they're playing off a knuckle sandwich,
That makes sense.
but I
I hadn't
don't know
considered that until right now, but yeah.
I don't know if it lands in the way they intended.
I think there's like, we can't strictly limit this to breakfast. Those non-breakfast people are going to come in here. Those Sonic nerds are going to come in here, and one of them is going to hate breakfast food.
I feel like a chicken knuckle sandwich would have worked better for a knuckle sandwich playoff.
So
IHOP should also hire us for their marketing.
no, because we're promoting Denny's. Hey, if you were Denny's, you could have this as your slogan. We're not Denny's. How many times do we have to tell you people? So we went there for breakfast this morning to have those meals, and Alicia shows up in her Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirt. I had the Tails 2x2x2, which actually just makes me think of like Noah's Ark, which doesn't tie into Sonic or Tails specifically at all. I think you had the same thing.
We had the same thing.
And Alicia,
I ordered first, and I was like, "Can I have the Sonic's Blue Blur Special?" And the waiter looked, and then he like leaned forward and squinted at the promo thing because he had no idea what I was talking
What the
about.
hell are you talking about?
nobody has ordered from that special menu ever before for that guy. We should note that it was one of those little table displays, so on the table. But when Christina and I got there first, it was turned facing the wall, so you couldn't even see it. It was like they were ashamed and trying to hide it. And then Christina got
The Dr. Eggman's Benedict.
right.
And then we got Shadow's Chaos Chocolate Pancakes for the table.
Right. So like our appetizer was chocolate pancakes for breakfast.
So sorry, Amy. Sorry, Knuckles. No representation from the Saluki Gamescast.
We'll make one more trip. We'll make a lunch trip.
There
to
we
get
go.
the sandwich.
We'll all get a chicken sandwich. And I'll say, like, I was disappointed that there was nothing themed to go along with these meals. Like,
Yeah.
I was hoping
it
for,
sure
like,
was an IHOP breakfast.
I was hoping for at the very least, like, I told Christina, I was like, maybe we'll get placemats we can color.
See, that would have been fun.
Or like at least a cardboard standee, so like you could have your picture made with Sonic or something. But your head through a gold ring or something. But like there was nothing fun like that. So
That's the kind of thing Denny's does, not IHOP.
But so it was kind of disappointing in that the food was fine. I mean, it's IHOP. It's exactly what you expect it to be. That's my take. I don't know how the two of you felt.
It was perfectly adequate.
Yeah, it sure was.
Perfectly adequate. It's like the low key way of dissing them. Your
was no
food is
Denny's.
perfectly adequate.
It provides me all the macronutrients to get me from 9:30 to 12:30.
That is a very Commander Data response.
It is a sufficient form of sustenance. Yeah, no, it sure was an IHOP breakfast.
I thought the pancakes were pretty good, I guess.
Oh yeah, no,
and
IHOP is good.
the chocolate pancakes were good, and that's what I was like, I don't want to order a whole thing of these, so I was glad that Christina ordered it for the table so we could all like at least take a bite.
Yeah.
Because eating a whole thing of that, I would not be here. I'd
Sugar
need
coma.
a gallon of water
Yeah.
because it was very rich.
No, she came to a Martian Odyssey last night in the Kleinau, and we talked then, and because we were both like, yeah, I kind of want this other thing, but I also kind of want the shadow pancakes. So we're like, well, we'll split an order.
Yeah, so we are doing our due diligence to get out there and cover the world of video games for you, our listening public, which means going to breakfast at IHOP. So we suffered.
I don't think we suffered.
Those are the things that I think would be really interesting in thinking about like archival practices of like video games and video game history. You know, so the conference I go to in Albuquerque, two of the guys there run the Learning Games Initiative, which is a huge games archive. I think they're at the University of Arizona. And I just wonder if like whatever it is they have, I want to say they had like Sonic themed gift cards or something like that. If they would try to get something like that, or just get like the menu type of, you know, something like that. Otherwise it really is just sort of like gone.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the things that the Video Game History Foundation has been trying to do is not so much the games, because other groups are doing that. And so their thing has been, well, we want to archive the sort of paraphernalia surrounding the game.
Yeah.
So like they've been on a big push to scan in all the old video game magazines and to produce an archive available online for that. But then also like promotional materials given out at E3 and PR materials that might have been sent to games journalists and to retail stores.
Or like even like when McDonald's Happy Meals had, Pokemon toys.
Right.
Oh, I think about like those little electronic
Yeah.
Sonic games that, I had like two of them. If they would have something like that, or I know you've mentioned before, like the little pamphlets inside the game
Yeah.
that like are not the game themselves. I think as we assume most people care about the disc or the cartridge of the game, but all of those other side things, the case and all that is important to it as well.
That's one of the issues, right? So like when you start talking about game preservation with older games, you're also including the game box itself. You're talking about the manual, but then also like anything extra that might have been included in there. So, 16-bit RPGs were really famous for including like maps of the game world, right? So like even if I can go online and download a ROM of a game, even if that's preserved, are those additional things preserved in any sort of way? And, you take a game like Falcon 4.0 that had like a 300-page manual that came with it. It was a flight sim game. And so it has a 300-page manual. Like, okay, well, is that being preserved? Has somebody scanned that and made that into a PDF or an ebook or something?
Yeah, one of the people at the conference, she was presenting on indigenous representation in games. And I don't remember what the name of the game, it was like Werewolf or something like that for the NES.
Right.
And she's saying like, if you just played the game, you would have no idea. The only way that we know that he's indigenous is from like an insert comic that came with the game itself. And so it's like, if you don't have that, you lose out on, these things that matter to our understanding of, games and characters and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's, similar to Birdo in Super Mario Brothers 2, the fact that Birdo is this trans character, right?
Yeah.
Like that the manual says Birdo, I think Birdo is a boy, but thinks he's a girl, is maybe how it words it, something along those lines. And you're like, if you just play the game, there's nothing in the game that alludes to that, right?
I think I was in college before I found out that Birdo is trans. I just always thought that Birdo was just a cis girl.
Right. And I mean, the same way with Poison in Final Fight, right? So Poison within the game Final Fight, there's nothing to allude to the fact that Poison is a trans character. That really came from promotional materials where, really out of Japan. Like it wasn't in the U.S. It was out of Japan where that material came from. And now I think they've embraced it in some of the games and like more directly alluded to it. But like, in that original game, there's nothing in the game. It's sort of like Dumbledore being gay in Harry Potter, right? Like that's not in the books. It's in the, her reference, J.K. Rowling's reference after the books were published. I suppose there's stuff you could read, this character as queer in the books, but like it's not explicitly in the books.
Yeah. And I mean, that's probably, I don't know what 20 years from now anybody's going to learn from like a Sonic the Hedgehog gift card to IHOP, but it still, I think, is important to note this promotion that happened for a month for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, and it becomes interesting because sometimes what you discover is when was the first time this bit of information published about this character, right? So like, when is the first time Mario is called Mario? Because it's not in Donkey Kong. He's still Jumpman in Donkey Kong. And so I think the first time Mario is called Mario might be in like one of the Game & Watch games.
Mario, when was the first time you were called Mario?
It was like 2 a.m. on August 11th of 1993.
Good to know. But like there's stuff like that when people go back and they start looking, well, where did this originate from with this character, right? And they start finding, oh, well, this actually comes from a promotional material thing. This doesn't come from the game itself.
Well, and from a fan studies perspective too, like there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, what's fanon and what's canon? So like, where's the source for it in canon versus fanon of like did this come from, the example that I'm thinking of similarly, the fact that Mario was first named in a Game & Watch game, you said? Like that's kind of like how with
I'm not 100% sure on that, but something like that.
But it was something outside of Super Mario Bros.
Right.
So like it's like I look at Doctor Who and like the movie that came out in the 90s with the 8th Doctor. The only reason that's considered canon is because Sylvester McCoy, who was the 7th Doctor, agreed to come in and do, the first part of it and have the regeneration scene. So like if that wasn't there, that movie would be considered fanon and no one would think of Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor.
Right.
So like where are those canon ties versus fanon things that we're all like, yes, let's go with this.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff can be really fascinating sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point that who preserves this? Like, right? Like there's nothing particularly looking at it. Today, there was nothing particularly fascinating that stood out to me other than I did make the point like, okay, well, these are the 6 characters they chose to give meals to, right? These are.
I also think it's interesting they forgot to capitalize Tails' name on the in the description of the Tails 2x2x2.
Yeah, so like, why do they choose these 6 characters? And I mean, I think we know that they're probably the most popular characters, but in a series like Sonic, there are, I feel like 50 plus characters now, named characters.
Well, and like, looking at Sonic, for example, like you said, 5 of the 6 are very easy. Okay, they're all in the movies. Amy, it's always interesting to see what Sonic merch goes with Amy and what Sonic stuff goes with Sally. Because Sally was the one in the Sad AM cartoon and in the comics. But Amy was in the games and in like Sonic X and all of that. So it's always, I think from my experience, that is another one of those kind of generational gaps of like, if you grew up with the Sad AM cartoon and the comics, you want more Sally content. But if you didn't grow up with those things, you don't even know that Sally exists.
Yeah, I don't know who Sally is. Maybe I've seen
I don't know
who this character is. But you know what? Now that I think about it, what they should have done is they should have had a 7th customize your own breakfast. This can be your DeviantArt Sonic OC character. That would have been every Sonic fan would be in there.
I will say I'm surprised that they did 6 and not 7, considering they gave each one a Chaos Emerald. I'm like, There's 7 Chaos Emeralds. Come on, do one more.
Yeah, but what 7th character?
Big the cat.
Just Froggy. Big and Froggy have their own meals.
Big the cat's fish fillet.
There you go.
I can't wait for the second run of this, and they've got all the secondary Sonic characters.
Like that alligator.
Vector the crocodile, thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly, the alligator.
But no, I said this too. I'm like, as someone who grew, Sonic Heroes was my first Sonic game. So like I see Amy and I'm like, where are Big and Cream? Like they're on the same level to me.
I still can't get over the fact that they made a character called Cream the Rabbit. That seems like such a something made up by fans, not like an actual character.
Oh, don't forget that her mom is named Vanilla.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, why not? Just why not?
So, if you're wondering who is the big Sonic fan, all your questions have now been answered.
Look, if you're wondering who is the biggest Sonic fan on this podcast, you haven't been listening to the podcast. Welcome to the Saluki Gamescast. This is clearly your first episode.
But yeah, I think that promotion ends next week sometime. Like it was like the first week of May they were ending that. So if you're listening to this, you can still rush out and get your Sonic pancakes.
Gotta go fast.
But you don't get anything cool with it. I just feel like if you're going to do that, do something like do one of those little cardboard like toothpick things that stick in and have the character on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like even that would have been cool because I would have taken that and been like, hey, I got a Tails figure.
Yeah.
Collect them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that would have been motivation to eat there and to try the different ones for children, I guess, or us.
I was say for children
adult Sonic fan.
30 seconds after saying I would have taken that home, then you add for children.
I have nieces and nephews. I used to get my nieces and nephews like Happy Meal toys and stuff, and I would like take them home, and then I give them to them. They'd be like, "What is this?" I was like, "I don't know." It's like something that came in a Happy Meal. You're a kid, play with it. It's some stupid toy.
Well, that's what I don't remember when we were talking about it in the group chat. And I think you must have been teaching because the three of us were just making all of these jokes about, this would be like the start of Justin's villain arc, is going to breakfast at IHOP for Sonic, or, thinking about like, oh, Justin's so embarrassed. And I couldn't, I was just remembering the conversation. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast of like your niece being embarrassed and like, send this to Justin's niece. This is how she can get him back. Force him to eat a Sonic breakfast.
Yeah, that was when we were at Buc-ee's and I made her have her picture made up with Bucky with me, like the costume mascot of Buc-ee's. And I was like, no, like you can come do this. She's 13, so like I could still get away with it. Actually, I guess that was right before she turned 13. So I was like, I can still force her to do this before she's 13. And like, as soon as she turns 13, like all that teen energy comes out and she's going to be like, no. And like, I hate you, uncle.
Enthusiastically embrace Sonic. That's how you can get him back.
Oh, just disown her. No niece or nephew of mine is going to listen to Sonic records.
Hey, I've said it before and I've said it again. You can come at Sonic games for a lot of things, but the music is always top tier.
This is what I don't want my nieces and nephews to turn out like. Defending Sonic music.
Well, we were talking about it earlier. All the artists going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When does all the Sonic artists go into the? When is Crush 40 going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Now, Crush 40 would belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
See,
more than Cher. Cher's not rock and roll.
I don't know. Have you seen that Turn Back Time music video? Like that's pretty rock and roll. All right, let's move on to what we've been playing. Alicia, what have you been playing?
It's still mostly been Pokemon Go. Honestly, the last 2 weeks, like once I get through this weekend is when I can finally breathe again. So it's still mostly been just getting Pokemon Go in where I can. I did also literally just start Ace Attorney, though. They had
Which one?
The very first one. So they had the Switch eShop had a sale going on where they had the original trilogy for like $9 or whatever, and I was like, for $9, sure. Because like I've never played them, I've never watched any playthroughs, so literally all I know is visual novels, Objection, and Gay Miles Edgeworth.
And Ryan,
Ryan, yeah.
they used to talk about those games all the time. They were big fans. Yeah, those are great games. I haven't played all of them, but I did play the first one, second one maybe, and I thought they were fantastic.
I'm literally in the middle of the first case, like cross-examining the witness. So I'm like, when I say I just started, I mean I was sitting in my office playing it before coming down the hall to record.
Okay,
but
that's cool.
I am excited to play more. One of the things for me too is like, I know everybody loves the OST so much, and so for me, like I'm very much someone who, when I'm working on things, I like listening to video game music, but I also prefer to listen to soundtracks from games I've played. And so I'm like, aha, let me increase my work playlist by getting to finally play Ace Attorney and learning exactly why everyone is so obsessed with these songs.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool game, and they've revisited it multiple times, and I feel like they haven't exactly worn it out yet. The concept, they would do minor innovations game to game, and
yeah, there's got to be like close to 10 of them.
Yeah, because there's the original trilogy, and there's the Apollo Justice trilogy,
and then
there's a prequel.
There's the Great Ace Attorney.
Yeah,
right.
So there's 8 of them. There might be like a couple still that are.
And then
Japan only.
I'll say, and then there's a couple. Like I know there's a Professor Layton Ace Attorney. Crossover game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a long running franchise.
Yeah, it's one I'm excited to get more into it. Like, it's one of those that has always been peripheral for me. Like my sister played it and really liked it, but she played it when I was already away at college, so I didn't experience it alongside her at all. But I see it pop up on my YouTube recommended often enough where real lawyers react to Phoenix Wright cross-examining a parrot and people taking stupid internet arguments and putting them in the Ace Attorney courtroom.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm excited to play it and dive in.
I think that's a game you'll be happy with. That's a game I feel confident recommending to most people.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a heck of a deal. If it's $9 for
the whole trilogy, that's that's some value.
Yeah. Like I normally don't. I'm very much a physical copy person. I don't even look at the eShop unless if I know there's a digital only game. Like when I got Power Wash Sim, I tried to see if I could get a physical copy before I was like, fine, I'll go to the eShop. But this one I was like, no, I'll just buy straight from the eShop. I don't care.
Yeah, I feel like that's happening more and more, particularly with systems like the Switch, right? Because so many people want it to be portable, and so they don't want to carry around a bunch of carts and stuff. So I feel like a lot of games are releasing exclusively digital on the Switch, especially those kind of smaller indie games.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Mario, what have you been playing?
I think just with how busy the week has been, I haven't played a ton. The late night game has been Balatro. I've been working through the challenges, and I'm to the last one, which is brutal. It's a Jokerless challenge. And so, it's very difficult.
I have not played that, so you have to complete it with no jokers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dang.
Yeah. I think I had one pretty decent run going yesterday, and then I threw it away by getting greedy and not discarding enough. But I think the highest hand I made was maybe 18,000 points. But that's less than a fifth of what you need for the final, you need to be able to make a 100,000 point hand for the final boss.
So are you still getting the other upgrades, like the celestial upgrades and stuff?
Yeah, so basically what it is that there are no jokers in the shop. So you can't buy jokers, so you're relying almost entirely on planet cards and tarot cards and the spectral packs to upgrade your cards.
So what about the tarot card that gives you a joker? Is that just not in there?
They're just, there's certain like things that just don't show up. So
Okay.
I don't think judgment doesn't show up. I believe the only way to get a joker is, so there are two of the vouchers. There's the blank voucher, and then there's the upgraded blank voucher, which gives you a joker slot. So you start with 0 out of 0 joker slots. So if you were to upgrade to get to 1 joker slot, and then you were to also roll, I don't know what they're called, but like the bonuses you get for skipping an ante,
Right.
one of them can create up to 2 common jokers. And so you could select that one, and that will make a random joker for you. That's the only way to get a joker. And that feels, I don't know, to do the joker challenge and do that would feel a little cheesy. I feel like that's more of like a cute Easter egg thing that you can do rather than something that somebody should try to do. I think the best way of going about it is prioritize planet packs and make a lot of glass cards.
Yeah. Yeah, that does sound incredibly challenging.
Yeah, they're fun. I think there are 20 challenges. I don't know if there will be an update to add more at some point, but the last 3 in particular are pretty difficult. But yeah, this last one, it is one of those things where going back and playing the normal game, even on like the higher stakes, it's like, oh, this is like up, and you win.
Well, you sent us a screenshot from your game the other night where you had a particularly good run.
Yeah, it's the first time I got into whatever the scientific notation score. It was like, I think the highest hand I got was something like 2.1 e to the 15th or something like that.
So what got you there? What were the jokers that got you there?
So I got very lucky. I got one of the legendary jokers, and the one that I got, I was joking. I was playing on Discord and I was streaming it to friends, and so the deck that I had was like centered around face cards. So I think I had the card that re-triggers your face cards,
right?
And then I had, I think, I don't know, I had something else I had to do with face cards as well. And so when the legendary joker came up, I was like, oh, watch, it's going to be the one that like gives you X mult, or like multiplies your mult by whatever for each face card that you destroy. And I was like, well, and that's going to be useless. And instead I got the one that it doubles your mult for every king and queen that you play. So I had that one. I had the one that re-triggers all of your face cards. And then I got the invisible joker that copies another one of your jokers. So I had 2 copies of the one that re-triggers. So it was like getting 8x mult. And then I had the whatever it's called, brainstorm or something like that, that copies your joker that's to the farthest on the left. So it was like I had essentially 2 copies of the re-triggering face cards and 2 copies of the every king and queen doubles your multiplier. And so it was like the worst joker I had was a polychrome, the second banana, Cavendish,
Right.
which is like multiplies your mult by 3 anyways. And so it was just like, that's the worst joker I had. And in many cases, that for many runs, that might be the best joker you could ask for. And so it was pretty nuts, but it was fun to finally get to that point.
Yeah, I find like the best hands I have are when you get those that it's just sending stuff off over and over again, right? Like you're re-triggering things multiple times, and you're getting multiples off of everything. And if you have it set at the slowest speed on the game speed, when you do that, it'll eventually just like speed itself up to like get through it, because it would take forever to get through all of those. But like it's this great feeling because you're just like, oh yeah, I'm doing nothing and the game is just beating itself for me.
Yeah, it's very much, and so I was playing full houses. So it was just like of kings and queens, whatever I could draw, and it was interesting to just be like, oh, and this is how math works.
Right.
Well, and that's where it got interesting, because it was like before I was copying the one that doubled your multi was just copying it another round of re-triggering face cards. So it was getting 3 triggers with that. And I was like, would it be a better, like, did you get a higher score if you moved it over here? And then it went crazy. And so it was, it was interesting. I mean, it's a great game. We've talked about it so much. It's great, but it's also like, means that I stay up till like 2 a.m. playing Balatro because I'm like, oh, it's just one more. Oh, just one more time. Yeah, just maybe one more.
That's what makes it great.
Yeah.
Like great games have that feeling of just one more turn.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'll just, it's the Civilization, like quicksand of like, if you play one of the Civ games, you're always thinking, well, just one more turn, and one more turn turns into like 4 hours later.
For me, that was always Stardew. It was just like, I'll just do one more day. I'll just go through one more day. I remember when I was in undergrad, there was a time where I think we had like a laundry room downstairs in our apartment. Yeah. And like I brought the laundry down, I went through. And so I went back up. I probably set a timer because I usually would set a timer, and I started playing and the timer probably went off. Didn't acknowledge it at all. I think literally like 3 hours later, I look over at my laundry basket. I'm like, oh, shit. I need to move my laundry over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've lost nights of sleep playing things at times where I would get into that sort of zone. But I think I did hear somebody call it Balatro, like you're pronouncing it, and saying that that's the Latin pronunciation.
Okay.
Well, apparently that's where the term comes from. So like it's Latin for like essentially a court jester.
Okay.
Which makes sense with the Jokers,
Sure.
right? Like, so they were saying that, but like, I don't know. I've heard it Balatro and Balatro and different ways. But yeah, I mean, that's a game that like, there were a couple of nights I was playing that game and I would start at, maybe 9 or 10, and then all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, whoa, what happened? And I need to stop and go to sleep. But then you're lying in bed and you're just thinking about it.
That was me with
next run. I'm gonna.
No, that was me with Power Wash Sim too. Like I'd be like, oh, just clean 5 more %.
Yeah.
Another 5%.
Yeah, I mean
5%.
Yeah.
Oh wow, this job is 93% done. I guess I should just do that last 7%.
That's part of why that game works really well, right? Like you feel like you're constantly making progress.
Well, I think I've probably talked about it before. Whenever I would play a lot of Tetris, I would start dreaming about Tetris. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if it hasn't happened with Balatro yet, it will happen at some point.
So there's actually scientific research on that. It's called the Tetris effect. So that's where the name of that game comes from. But there's actually scientific research on the fact that people both start seeing it in their environment, like the tiles of this room and everything. You start seeing the pieces and how they fit together. But then you also like start dreaming about it. And so it's been studied because one of the thoughts is that our dream state, or like when we sleep at night, part of that is to help us figure out problems, like to like work on problems we had during the day. And like it's part of the reason why sometimes when you wake up, they theorize when you wake up in the morning, you go, oh, I know how to do that thing now. And so part of that is that we're doing that with Tetris. We're kind of working through it. And so, yeah, like Balatro is one of those sorts of games where you're like, oh, next time this will be my strategy. I just thought I could do this. I know when you're talking about moving the Jokers around, when I first started that game, I didn't think about that you could move the Jokers around. And then
how that would affect your score.
Yeah. And then the game at some point like says something, along the lines of it. And then I started thinking, oh, well, yeah, like rearranging your cards actually is like just obvious. I should be doing this.
Yeah, that's one, and that's like key to one of the challenges. It's the ceremonial knife that like destroys whatever the Joker to the right is.
Right.
That one is pinned to the far left, so it's always the leftmost Joker. So it means like if you want something that doesn't get destroyed, you got to keep just feeding it fodder. The ordering really does end up mattering. And I mean, I think that it's one of the boss antes that will shuffle your Jokers around.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's where you saw it.
Yeah, it's a great game. Anything else?
Nah, that's basically it.
All right. Well, I played a new game called Mini Shoot Adventures, which I have to check the name still because it has like the most generic name. But this game is anything but generic. So it is how to describe this game? It is a adventure game in the style of the 2D Zeldas, where you play as a spaceship and you have dual stick controls, and it is also a bullet hell shooter.
And what are you playing this on? Sorry.
On Steam.
Okay.
So I know all of that sounds very complicated, but basically it plays like the 2D Zelda games. You are a ship, so you're flying around, and when you fight enemies, particularly bosses, it's like something like an Ikaruga. Like, so it is bullet hell, like them firing hundreds of bullets on the screen at the same time, and you are trying to avoid those. But it's all played in a very Zelda-like fashion. And so you have rooms you'll go into, and the room will have 4 enemies, and then when you kill those, 4 more enemies will appear, and then 4 more enemies. So very kind of Zelda-like in that nature. But you're also exploring this overworld and going into like dungeons and getting your way through those. This game is just amazing. Like almost from the first moment I started playing it, I just loved this game. And so it starts out very kind of simple, and then when you get into the overworld and you start realizing just like how kind of like deep this game is, you're constantly finding new secret areas in the game. So there's constantly like areas that there's a wall here, but like if you notice there's like a small crack, and so you can kind of go through that crack and get into a different area. And then it has different themed areas of the overworld. So like there's a desert area, and there's a giant dragon that's kind of going through there that you have to shoot. And there's a Lost Woods type area. And then you are gaining new abilities to access these new areas. So like you gain a boost on your ship so that you can go over like small areas of water. Normally you just fall into the water and you like respawn, but like now you can like boost right at the edge, and you'll go over that little small area of water to reach new areas. And it's constantly feeding you these upgrades. There's 3 difficulty levels. So there's an easy level that it says is like basically kind of a breeze to get through. And then there's the medium or normal level, and then a hard level. I'm playing on the normal. I will say so far, nothing has been really hard, like so overwhelming that like I was dying or getting frustrated. But it's just been a constant, like you're gaining new upgrades, you're getting new access to new areas, you're discovering new parts of it, you're discovering some new secret. It is so well paced in that regard, which is the problem with a lot of Zelda clones, is they get that pacing wrong and you can get frustrated really quickly. And then the gameplay, like you're upgrading your ship so like you can shoot further, you can shoot faster, your shots do more damage, you have a higher crit rate, and it just plays really well. Like, I mean, it plays sort of like an overhead shooter when you get into those sections and everything, but never so overwhelming so far that I think most people would get frustrated. It feels like a game that's very accessible to most people. You don't have to be a diehard game player or anything. And so I'm maybe 2 hours into it or so, and I just keep liking it more the more I play of it. And like it almost hooked me like right from the beginning, which doesn't happen a lot. There's a demo of it that's available, so if you just want to try it out, but it would be a fantastic game to play on Steam Deck. I've not played it on my Steam Deck yet, but it feels like a game that's like designed for that. It might be a little hard sometimes to see because the enemies and everything would be small and the bullets would be small. So maybe that'd be challenging, but so far, this has been a fantastic game, and I feel like it came out of nowhere. Like I heard nothing about this until I heard somebody else playing it and talking about it, and I was like, oh, I'll check that out. That sounds interesting. And like, I downloaded the demo. I played through the demo, which lets you play the first dungeon. And as soon as I was done, I was like, all right, I'm I'm pulling this up on Steam and buying it. Like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, that was going to be the question I was going to ask is where did you hear about it or where did you see it? Because I hadn't heard about it, but I was just looking at it. Have to look into it more, maybe check out the demo.
Yeah, I mean, check out the demo. I don't think the screenshots do it justice for like how it plays and everything. You know, it looks fine, but like it's not a stunner like some games. But yeah, it also just has a bad title. Like
Yeah.
like it's cute, but it sounds too generic.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like a phone game, right?
Yeah,
like and it doesn't sound. It needs something more distinct.
It's not a name that anybody would hear and go like, oh, you're not checking it out based off of the name.
No.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's better ways to do that. But yeah, really cool game. You know, and again, just secrets. Like you're constantly uncovering secrets, seeing something over there. How do I get to that? Oh, you're not going to find out yet, but you're going to have to go all the way over here, and then you're going to go through a dungeon. And you're going to fall through the floor and land in this area and access that. So, it's the best parts of Zelda. Like I always say, the best thing of Zelda is there are puzzles that can stump you, but when you finish one of those puzzles, you feel like the smartest person in the world. And this game is doing that in very neat micro doses.
Cool.
So real fun, mini shoot adventures. All right, let's move on over into the news. And we have a fair amount of news here. So this first one isn't significant other than I think it's kind of neat. Castlevania Legacy of the Darkness had a new code discovered after 25 years of release. Somebody has discovered a new code for the game. And so it's my understanding that the very earliest game codes were put in by programmers so that when they were testing the game, so like you would put a level skip into the game so that when you were testing it, you could just get to the level you need it to get to. If you need it to test the last level of the game, you don't have to play through the whole game. And then people start figuring those out, and then magazines start publishing them, and then companies start putting codes in their games intentionally. So like the classic example of this would be like Mortal Kombat or NBA Jam, right? So you want to play as President Clinton, here's the code you put in NBA Jam. And so it was a way to promote their game, right? And to find a code that's been lost for 25 years in a game is really interesting because at some point, somebody at the publisher just didn't go, hey, just send these out to whatever website or whatever magazine and just let people know about this.
Yeah.
And I always think it's interesting when there are things hidden in games that people don't discover for decades.
Do we know what the line of code was for? Like,
I think there was one that was a sort of God mode. And then I think there was a second code in addition to that one. So,
Konami, please give Castlevania some love again. Please.
Well, they're supposedly working on multiple projects. We'll see. Konami. Fallout 76 saw its player base surge to over 1 million players in a day after the release of the Fallout series on Amazon Prime. So
that's wild.
This game was considered a complete disaster when it launched, and now to over 1 million players in large part because of this TV show. So we talked about this with why does Sony invest in a remake of The Last of Us less than a decade after that game came out? This is why. Because if your show or your movie hits big, people will rush out and try to buy a game attached to it. It was part of the reason why it was kind of weird that Nintendo didn't have Mario Wonder ready to go at the same time as the film. Because you got to imagine all those kids leaving the theater were like, Mom, I want to play Mario. And,
yeah.
But I guess they had it, later the same year. Let's see. The third Sonic film, which is coming out this Christmas, has been described by one of the crew as, quote, very Sonic Adventure 2.
To the surprise of no one.
Well, I mean, those first two films
Rip to Sonic Adventure 1.
Yeah.
But those first two films aren't really based on any particular game. So I am a little surprised that this one is, if it's drawing heavily from a specific game.
Oh, and see, for me, I'm like, the minute that we got confirmed Maria, I was like, yeah, it's Sonic Adventure 2.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that like I'm not surprised that
Yeah.
that they would skip over Sonic Adventure 1. Because I mean, I don't know what Shadow is. Is Shadow a anti-hero?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's a villain to begin with.
Yeah.
He's an anti-hero firmly at this point.
Yeah, at this point. But in Sonic Adventure 2, I mean, he's in the dark.
Yeah, he's
story.
he's on the
And
villain
so
team.
He's got a gun.
he does
Not in
have
SA2, he doesn't. Oh, that's only in Shadow the Hedgehog.
So it's not surprising that them bringing in this like new antagonist or the foil to Sonic would be Shadow rather than any other character that they would pick from. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I think, as you said, I'm not surprised. I'll be interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, like, I don't know. I think similarly, I was kind of bummed that the second movie didn't take more from SA1, honestly, just because I had read a really good fanfic that did a really good job of incorporating SA1 while still maintaining the feel of the movies. But I'm like, you know, with this one, I feel like everyone is so, like, people are invested in Tails and Knuckles as characters on their own. People are invested in Shadow's backstory in a way that they aren't necessarily with, like, Knuckles and Tails. So introducing them, you could kind of have more freedom versus this, like, we're all ready to see a 10-year-old die on screen, you know? Everyone's ready for Maria to go down.
It just means that we won't get Big the Cat until the Sonic Frontiers movie. Although Big
We
is
won't
on
get Sonic
Team Amy, right?
Yeah,
Or
Team Rose.
whatever that game is
I
called.
would love to have a Sonic Heroes movie before that. That would be great.
I mean, Big is in Sonic Adventure 2.
No, he's
And
hidden
he's
throughout.
hidden in the
Yeah, he's in
levels, but
Sonic
he's-
Adventure 1 as a playable. He has a storyline there. In 2, he's hidden in various levels because the developers were so mad at how much everybody hated him that they just hid him in various places. So
Yeah,
it's-
so he's in the game. I mean, so
If they have like a random Big the Cat moment in Sonic 3 movie, that would be incredible.
That
Just
would
like
be.
he's like in the background somewhere.
I mean, what gets me and what I'm surprised that we haven't seen yet, so I wonder about this film, is this the film where we get Sonic running along a pier or boardwalk and the well like jumping over him and jumping through it and everything?
yeah.
Because after they did that in the first level of Sonic 1, they tried to recreate that moment multiple times.
In every game.
And so I'm really surprised we haven't seen that imagery yet. So if they're leaning more directly into the games, right, which was a big criticism people had of like the first film, was that it, you know, you take Sonic and you take Sonic completely out of the Sonic world, and then the second film they lean more towards the games. So I wonder if this one, if they're leaning even more into it, you know, obviously borrowing from Sonic Adventure 2. If this is where we start to get that stuff, right? So we're getting the music from the games, we're getting this other stuff. Is this where they're just going to say, oh yeah, like people don't care, people will buy into this stuff?
Yeah, I kind of like that it's not too heavily invested in the games. Like, I don't need them to tell the Sonic Adventure 2 story, but I don't mind if they pull aspects from it. And,
Right.
you know, I think that the first two movies have probably been better because they haven't felt too devoted to like representing what happens in the games.
Yeah.
Well, there's not much of a story in those games. I mean, there's not like something to support a 2-hour feature film.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fine. Like, I mean, you'd probably borrow
For the
more.
average player, Alicia, not for the people that know all of the deep
Depends on the
lore.
game. It depends on the game. But yeah.
I just don't like I think you would be better off drawing from like the cartoons or the comic if you really want to adapt a storyline.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you would definitely, if you were going to do a story from the games, it would have to be the 3D Sonic games for sure.
Yeah, of course.
Because the 2D ones, yeah.
Yeah, there's just no story. The story is what is in the instruction manual in those. They're like Mario games for the most part. But yeah, even in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, like, I mean, like, this is my personal bias, but like, I don't remember anything about those stories. Like, I mean, like the games were fine, but like the story wasn't anything super memorable.
I was going to say, I think you like hijack the president's limousine at one point in one of them, but that might be the Shadow game.
I think that the second game you'd hijack because I think that's a Tails level and a Rouge level, if I remember right.
Well, I guess I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
The Shadow the Hedgehog game makes canon that the president of the United States has a photo of Sonic the Hedgehog on his desk.
Yeah.
Because of course you would.
Well, so he saves him in this game and in this film, and then in the fourth film, right? That's where you bring the president like fully in as a character.
Well, that's that's like the Sonic X Shadow Generations games, like bringing back Black Doom, and we're like, what? We're acknowledging this? We're acknowledging anything beyond Shadow had guns?
Yeah, so we'll see how that turns out this Christmas. Those first two films have done very well financially, so I'm sure they're expecting this film to be a big hit for them as well.
Yeah, well, and like the Knuckles TV show just dropped, and I know that hasn't been received as well from what I've seen, but still solid. So we'll see.
Yeah, the big criticism there has been that Knuckles isn't actually in the show very much.
Yeah, that he's not really the main character. It's about the deputy.
Yeah. So, funny, you name a show after a character and then that character is not the main character. That's like kind of people are going to feel a little like they were bait and switched on that. So I understand that reaction.
Yeah.
Let's see. Xbox hardware revenue is down 31% year over year. So Xbox just put out some figures. Most of their revenue in games was up when it came to game sales and subscriptions through Game Pass and all of that. But when it comes to hardware, they're down. This is obviously the big problem for Xbox right now. People just aren't buying the hardware. People are buying Switches and PlayStations instead. And so that's why we continue to see Microsoft move Xbox as a platform more and more to like kind of the ether, right? Like to the cloud, like that Xbox as a platform is wherever games are. You know, that seems to be their pitch. So they just debuted games onto PlayStation hardware. So Sea of Thieves and those games are coming out over there. It feels more and more like the future of Xbox is less and less about the traditional console as we know it. And that's not to say that they won't put out new hardware. They keep saying that they are. Sarah Bond, the head of president of Xbox, has said, yeah, we're working on new hardware. It's going to be the most powerful hardware ever. But then there's all these rumors that the future of Xbox is opening up the platform so that things like Steam and the Epic Game Store could put their storefronts on there in addition to the Xbox storefront. And when you start thinking it from that perspective, you start to think, oh, well, maybe Microsoft really doesn't view this as, well, we have to sell the most boxes next console generation because we don't feel like we are going to sell the most boxes next console generation. And that's always difficult because there's so much, like when you look back at the history of games, it's not like one company has completely dominated the history of game console generation. So like
right, even with the powerhouse that Nintendo has been for handheld consoles, they had the the GameCube was the last plug into the TV console that really was a massive hit until the Switch.
I'd say the Wii was far bigger than the GameCube was.
Yeah, the Wii, the GameCube was considered a failure by Nintendo.
That's so weird to me.
It's the Wii that was their big hit.
Yeah.
And then the Wii U was a failure, and then they had the Switch. But yeah, I mean, like, so PlayStation 1 and 2 do super well, but then Xbox 360 mostly dominates that next generation. Eventually, PlayStation 3 catches up to them. But, you know, then we turn around with the next generation, and the Xbox One's kind of a flop, and the PlayStation 4 dominates, and then the Switch comes out, and it has outsold both of these systems. You know, so like it's not like one company has continually dominated the video game industry and been in charge of sales. Mm-hmm. Usually these companies get a bit of hubris and it blows up in their face. So, you know, we'll see how this goes. And Sony is known for their hubris, and it's not like Sony has ever been like, you know, Sony, these are the people who are like, hey, like we're going to sell the PlayStation 3 at $500, and people are like, isn't that a little high? And we think people will get a second job to afford our console. Like,
oh gosh,
you don't get too more egotistical than that.
Isn't that a little high? No, not if you really love us.
What are you talking about? It's totally worth a second job.
Let's see. Capcom has announced that they are pulling Dark Void Zero, and Flock from the Steam store starting on May 8th. So you will no longer be able to buy those. If you already own them, you'll be able to continue to download and play them through Steam. But after May 8th, you'll no longer be able to buy those games. They've only announced for Steam so far. They haven't announced on console storefronts, but these games are discounted on sale on Steam until May 8th. They also currently have them on sale on the Xbox store. So lots of people are suspecting that they're just going to pull these from everywhere. There's no reasoning given. Usually when they pull older games like this that aren't like online games, is usually about some sort of licensing issue. Sometimes, you know, the most common one I think is with music. So we have some sort of pop music in this, and we would have to relicense this to continue to sell it, or go into the game and remove it, and that would be costly. So it seems weird with this. So if you want those games, go buy them now. They're on sale. The Entertainment Software Association, this is the lobbying group for the video game industry. This is the people who used to put on E3 before E3 collapsed, has told the U.S. Copyright Office that they do not support digital libraries online for the preservation of games. So last year we talked about that the Video Game History Foundation had paid for research into how many games were available. Like even just going back 10 years ago, how many of those games are available to purchase? And they were using this information. The hope was to make an argument to the U.S. Copyright Office that there should be an exclusion for libraries to provide a digital online archive of games. So, you know, the fact that there are places, I think, Mario, you were saying like the University of Arizona and like the University of Michigan, I know has a really cool game archive in their library. So there are these places where you can go physically, but like that makes it inaccessible to the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
Like even me as a researcher in video games, I can't just fly to Ann Arbor, Michigan on a whim to go play such and such game.
Yeah.
Right. And so what a lot of these libraries want to do is say, well, hey, we can take this game, we can provide it digitally and let people play it or access it or check it out or do something where they can play this game. We can't be mailing carts and CDs all over the country, but we can do this. And the ESA has, in response to this, has said, hey, we don't support this in any way, shape, or form. So the ESA is made up of your major video game companies, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, Electronic Arts, all those sorts of companies make up the ESA. So this is them saying, hey, we're not going to support this. That doesn't mean that the U.S. Copyright Office will side with them.
But that is a big blow.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, ideally, the ESA would say, hey, let's work on something.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a compromise. This means that any sort of work that does get done, it's going to be in an antagonistic fashion.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. Yes, piracy is out there, right? Like, it's not hard to go find ROMs of old games, but that's not all games. It becomes much more challenging with specific titles if they're more obscure to find those games. And also, we've talked about it before on here, that not everybody can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows how to do that, right? I know plenty of people who are like, I would like to play old games. And I'm like, well, you can just go find them. And they're like, well, how do I even begin to do that?
Hi, me. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. And, if there was an
and
easy...
even take for example, and games that I'm not a PC gamer. So okay, I can go find a ROM of Pokemon Blue or something, but then I have to learn how to play it on PC instead of being able to do something that I'm more familiar with.
Right. And, these games are not being provided by the companies. It would be one thing if every company had a service like Nintendo Online, right, where you can go on there and you can play an archive of Nintendo's games, from the NES through the N64. But first off, Nintendo doesn't have all their games on there. They trickle out a couple every few months, taking their time. And second, they don't have a ton of third-party games. It's easier to put out one of their own games on there than it is a third-party game, because then they have to pay those companies. But then one of the issues that companies run into a lot of times is they just don't own the license to those games anymore. So, if you want the home improvement game for the Super Nintendo, the company that made that game, which I have no idea, I'm going to say Accolade as a guess. That seems like a game they would have made. They don't own the rights to Home Improvement, the television show. ABC Disney owns the rights to that. And even at that, if Disney wanted to put that game back out, there's the likeness of Tim Allen in that game. So, are you having to pay him and Jonathan Taylor Thomas and the other actors that might appear in that? Are there audio clips of those actors that appear in the game? Are you having to pay them for that? And so that's the reason we don't get particularly licensed things. And then sometimes those companies have changed hands so many times, nobody knows who owns the rights to a game.
Yeah.
So, that was the issue with Windjammers. For the longest time, Windjammers couldn't get re-released because nobody knew who owned Windjammers. And then it turned out it was a law firm in Michigan owned the rights to Windjammers, through some convoluted thing.
Well, and this doesn't even just go for Home Improvement, the game. Really, we had that.
Yeah.
But it also, this is something that there's starting to be conversations about. Oh, should they remake Kingdom Hearts? And we're all like, no. Because after the first game, that was the only one that they had the license for the Tarzan world. And so, if you were to remake it now, what do you do with that? Do you, is Disney going to give that license again? Because they didn't for the rest of the game. So, now do you cut that world out of a remake? What? Right. This is big games as well as those smaller ones that you had to live there to see them.
Well, I mean, and that's going to be an issue, right? So Kingdom Hearts is a PlayStation 2 game. That's at this point a retro game, right? We're 20 years out from the PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
So at this point with something like that, you have to start thinking about, the voice actors. So you have to go back and get the rights to all those voice actors who recorded lines for that game. There's a lot of voice acting from big name Hollywood stars in those.
Jesse McCartney is Roxas.
Yeah, is it Haley Joel Osment?
Haley Joel Osment is Sora. Like,
Lance Bass is Sephiroth.
yeah, like there's big names.
Well, but I mean, even just the Disney characters, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like in a lot of cases, they went and got the original voice actors.
Yeah.
And some of those
Yeah, James
people,
Woods still did Hades. Jodie Benson still did Ariel. Like,
yeah, I mean, so James Wood is still with us, but like he's getting up there in age, and there's probably some of those other actors who have passed away. So like I know they did that special for the 100th anniversary of Disney Animation, and they have a lot of the characters in that, and they have them speaking, and they had to like
they took
go
unused
hire new
voices.
voice actors to do those voices because, you know, some of those people have passed away. Like they can't record new lines.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's like, it's a problem. And so like, there should be some sort of happy medium. It is continually amazing to me and insane to me that if I want to play a lot of old games, I can't just go on the computer at this point and pay $2 to download and play that game and like have it in my Steam Deck. Like sometimes there's collections available, but like if I want to go play Karnov right now, like I can't go on Steam and just say, well, like search Karnov and find it and pay $2 and play that game, or $4, or whatever price they want to charge. Like that's just not accessible in that way. And so there's a lot of games like that Vice Project Doom, I don't know how to play that game legally at this point. Why can I not just go on Steam and pay $2 or $3 and play that game? It's available on the Nintendo Switch online service, but it's not available just to like go buy, which seems crazy.
Localized Mother 3. There's still no legal way to play Mother 3 in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other story, right? Like a whole other can of worms. So I think I talk about that because that's also been on my mind lately with the emulators being released for iOS, so that people with iPhones are for the first time emulating games, or without hacking their iPhone. For the first time, they're playing emulated games, and you see and hear a lot of people doing this, right? Who are going back and playing these old games. Oh, I love this game when I was a kid. I'm going to play Pokemon on my phone.
Especially, yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week that Nintendo didn't do something like this, but especially those old, like original Game Boy games, like those work really well,
right?
Emulated on a phone. I think you had talked about playing Beetle. Yeah, those games are probably a little bit more difficult, but where you have like a directional pad and that's, you only have 4 movements or 4 directions that you can move, those work really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a turn-based role-playing game like that, right? Like Pokemon is, like you don't have to have quick reflexes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy that there's not a Nintendo app on my phone where I can go on there and pay a subscription fee or per download games and play games from the NES and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. And it's crazy that other companies aren't doing that either, right? Like, okay, Nintendo's not doing it, but Sega could do that, or Capcom or Konami could do that as well. And none of them are doing it. And it seems sort of crazy. And I think the end result is at some point we hit a tipping point where people go, well, you know what? You're not doing this, so we just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
We're just going to go like pirate these games, and we're just not even going to worry about it. And like I think a lot of people are already at this way. Like you see people selling these Chinese handhelds now that are just designed to emulate games. They come with the emulators installed on them. You just have to provide your own ROMs, and they're basically like a Game Boy or a Game Boy Advance. Weird situation there. Let's see. Blizzard has canceled BlizzCon 2024. They said it will return in the future, but no show this year, which probably means they don't have a lot to show off this year. So they don't want to hold a big convention. Embracer has announced that they are splitting in 3. So Embracer has been selling off some of their properties. What is left, they're going to split into 3. So one of these is Asmodee,
I think. Although Asmodee would actually make sense now that I'm looking at the spell. I've always said Asmodee, but I think it's Asmodee would make sense.
Okay, so this is going to be the company that manages all the board game properties they own, which is like apparently a ton of different board games.
Yeah.
So like Ticket to Ride and Catan and like a lot of the big names that you know in board games, they own the rights to apparently. So they are going to, that's going to be one of the companies. Then they're going to have a company called Coffee Stain and Friends. Apparently that name is temporary. They're going to change it at some point.
I was about to say, are these real names?
the Asmodee, like that
Asmodee is real.
That is real.
Like that one, I'm familiar with.
That one I can maybe understand.
They're keeping that one. It's the other two are not.
Okay.
They're temporary names. So that's going to be a lot of their kind of free to play in mobile games. But it's also going to have like companies like THQ Nordic is going to be under this label. So it's not entirely clear what the distinction for this label is. Maybe it's going to be a lot of their kind of smaller titles will go under here. And then the third company is going to be Middle Earth Enterprises and Friends. So yes, that is a horrible name. They absolutely need to change that. And this is going to be their home for obviously the rights to the Lord of the Rings, which they purchased. So they're the ones, if you want to make new Lord of the Rings movies, you have to go through them. So obviously they're going
They own it for everything, not just games.
They own it for games and movies. I don't think they own the books.
Okay.
Right, say I cannot imagine the Tolkien estate selling the rights to the books.
So are they the ones then that made, what was it called, Rings of Power? Or
Nope, that's
do they not own it for TV as well?
No, that deal had
separate.
already been made
Oh, okay.
prior to them buying this. So it's only like last year that they bought this.
Yeah.
So,
Copyrights
but
are
they're doing the Riders of Rohirrim, I think.
Is
yeah,
that a
that's
new
the
that
show?
movie.
That's the anime movie
Yeah.
that's coming out this year.
And then did they
I-
are they the ones doing Tales of Middle Earth?
Tales of the Shire?
Tales of the Shire?
I don't think they're making it, but they may that. So a lot of these deals were put into place before they got these rights.
Yeah.
So those games still get to come out, right? So like Gollum, like that, the rights had already been negotiated for that before they got these rights. So I don't know that any games that have come out so far those deals have been worked out since they got the rights.
Okay.
But my understanding is, yes, they're going to make games themselves, but also they're going to like potentially license this out to other people, right? So kind of, well, Disney's not making any games themselves anymore, but think of like how Disney's doing like Star Wars, right? Like licensing the rights out to different video game companies to make different kinds of games.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be doing that, but then, yeah, also like any new movies, any new animated shows, TV shows, like would have to go through them. So yeah, it'd be those rights. It's also Crystal Dynamics who has made the last 3 Tomb Raider games. Still blows my mind that like the way they were treated after that trilogy of Tomb Raider games, because that second Tomb Raider game is a fantastic game, and the third one's good. It's just not as good as the second one. But even those were good games, and it seems crazy the way they got treated through all that. But they own them, and several other like kind of big name the properties that they still own will all be under this label. The thing that I thought was really interesting, and I forgot Embracer bought, is Dark Horse Comics.
What?
So they own Dark Horse Comics, which, it makes a whole lot of sense when you see this under the same label as the Lord of the Rings, because if they're licensing out the Lord of the Rings for movies and books and games and stuff like that, then they would also want to do that, right, with Dark Horse Comics potentially. And and potentially also mine those Dark Horse comics for video games they could adapt. So that starts to make a whole lot of sense to put those kind of properties together, like under the same label, not necessarily together. I don't think they're going to do any crossover Lord of the Rings with Dark Horse comics. Alien and Predator, Alien versus Predator versus Bilbo.
That is so interesting.
Oh man, I would play
You'd
that
have
game.
to make it like Tom Bombadil, actually give the Middle Earth a chance.
Yeah.
That's how we get a Tom Bombadil comic.
Tom Bombadil game.
There we go.
That's true. I think he.
I feel like he's gonna show up in the Tales of the
Shire.
Tales.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That looks, I assume that's an Animal Crossing Stardew.
Very.
That's what
Yeah.
it looks like.
I mean,
Yeah.
there was farming shown in that trailer,
Yeah.
so yes, that's the other thing. Yeah, the Tales of the Shire game. I don't have that on here, but that game got announced.
Very cozy
Trailer.
life simulator style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that-
it very much gives me Animal Crossing, like Harvest Moon.
Yeah. Harvest Moon is probably a better.
The Disney game they put
Disney
out,
Dreamlight Valley.
yeah, Dreamlight Valley,
Yeah.
reminded me of that. Yeah, I mean, it looks like one of those games. And
I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
I mean, I think, that's the cool thing. If you're going to make Lord of the Rings games, don't make every Lord of the Rings games an action game, right? Like, not everything needs to be a God of War knockoff, which is, I think, the instinct sometimes. So, like, I like that they're doing this.
Yeah.
I like theoretically that they're doing a Gollum game. I mean, that was a disaster, but like the idea of like, let's do a stealth game
Yeah.
in this world, particularly because Tolkien was not like rah, like, let's have everybody fight, right? Like Tolkien was much more like, hey, like that's what happens in the books and the movie, right? Like the characters aren't in these big battles. They're like kind of skimpering around and like trying to avoid fighting. Like particularly the hobbits, right? Like, because they can't.
Did either of you look up or know what was it called? The Mines of Moria game was? Was that like an
gosh.
RTS? I have no idea what that even was.
I forgot that even was a thing.
I don't even know what the game is called.
I forgot. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
it
look
was
up.
something like a real-time strategy game. It was something along those lines.
And maybe I'm thinking of like a Deep Rock Galactic instead, but
right.
I also feel like it would make sense for those to be somewhat similar.
Okay, Google says it was the Lord of the Rings Return to Moria was a survival game, crafting game.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Came out in October and we all forgot about it.
Yeah, I think I went to like a GameStop and saw it and I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that this was even a thing.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of those games that got announced and then the hype just died.
Yeah,
I wonder if that Gollum game hurt that game. I wonder if
I wouldn't be surprised.
probably.
I
'cause
wouldn't be surprised if it hurts Tales of the Shire as well. If people are like,
I don't think it'll hurt Tales of the Shire because it's such a different genre.
maybe.
But I think that I think that it probably did hurt this because both of these are very like intense.
Sure, and I think like it is a very drastic difference, but I could also understand if people are also just like hesitant to buy a Lord of the Rings video game since they haven't put out a good one
Since the PS2
God knows
era.
how long.
well, I mean, the Shadows of Mordor.
Okay,
is
that's
a good
true.
game.
Those were well, I haven't played the second one. The first one was a good game.
Yeah, the first one's a really good game. But yeah, I mean, well, that's the danger, right? That's the danger with any IP is that if that IP comes to be associated with bad games, I mean, it's sort of like Dragon Ball, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, I know people like those Dragon Ball games, but outside of Dragon Ball Fighters, most of those games have been fairly forgettable. And
Yeah, I think maybe the first Budokai, but they made like 4 of those.
yeah, and like after a while, I hear there's a new Dragon Ball game, and I kind of go, like I have no interest. One, because I'm not a fan of the anime, but two, because they haven't really been known for good games.
Yeah.
And that's Harry Potter kind of got that way. Like those games, they
Sure.
made a ton of those. They kind of weren't thought very well of, and then
Yeah.
Hogwarts Legacy came out, and that game, fans seem to really like it, even if it didn't get raving critical reviews.
Right, it was like the highest selling game last year.
Yeah, it did really well with the fans. So, yeah, I mean, for that reason alone, I hope Tales of the Shire is like a game that at least the fans like, even if it doesn't get great critical reviews.
Yeah,
because you'd
as
hate
a
to
fan,
see
as a diehard Tolkien fan, I'm way more excited for Tales of the Shire than I was for either Gollum or the Moria game.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what matters, or what should matter. I mean, the critics are gonna have their take, but like if the fans like it, who cares what the critics have to say? No offense.
Yeah, I mean, if the fans like it, then there will be more games in that franchise. Let's see. So yeah, the Embracer splitting in 3. Obviously they've sold off a lot of properties. This is by no stretch like a cementing of Embracer being a safe and sound company at this point. Like, I mean, I still would not be surprised if in another year or two we don't hear Embracer has fully collapsed. I think this is Embracer trying to restructure and to survive. Hearing though that they own like all those board game properties, which I didn't realize, like that seems of great value. Like somebody.
The board games and Dark Horse Comics, I'm just like, whoa, why are you falling apart?
Yeah, I guess I don't even know like what's a Dark Horse comic. Like they used to do the Star Wars comics, I know.
As a Dark Horse, I tend to think of like them doing comic adaptations / spin-offs.
Yeah.
But then you're building on a fan base that already exists, so like you have it easier than like trying to start something brand new altogether.
Yeah, I mean it's still, I guess for people of a certain age, I don't know how it does to like young people today, but for people of my age, I still remember it being a well thought of brand, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't as big as Marvel or DC, but it was like well respected. Like I would say,
like the Dark Horse Transformers and G.I. Joe comics were the comics for those series that I read.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it had a better reputation than Image.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Gary's Mod is removing 20 years of Nintendo uploads after DMCA takedowns. This is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So that is how, if you upload a video on YouTube that's basically just the entire Barbie movie, they will file a DMCA takedown and have that movie removed. Gary's Mod sent out these takedowns to a lot of the people who have made these, Nintendo sent these takedowns to Gary's Mod, and so they're going through and just removing this content, and they have actually put out a statement asking people just to remove them themselves.
Yeah, I was gonna say they literally put out an ask and we're like, y'all, we're gonna do our best, but there's no way we can get everything, so like please do us a favor.
Yeah, it's weird like after 20 years for this to suddenly become a thing, right? Like Nintendo, like surely there was someone at Nintendo who knew this was a thing in the last 20 years.
Yeah. Nintendo really in the last year has been cracking down on things in some kind of extreme ways where it's like, man.
And I wonder if a big part of that is just with the new console coming out. Like we need to like really, sort of corral everything that is ours so that we have a clear image of everything that we're doing so that we can, sort of present our image in a particular way as we release this new thing. And then, I mean, like they've kind of always shut down a lot of fan projects and stuff like that over the years. But yeah, after 20 years, it's odd, but that makes me wonder if that would be a reason why.
I also wonder how much of it is tied to the Steam Deck. So now all of a sudden you have computer games in a consoleized format, right? So somebody could be at the grocery store, a kid could be at the grocery store playing a Gary's Mod and having Mario and Luigi running around and Mario with a gun shooting Luigi in the head, and somebody's like seeing this, right? Where it used to be, this was on a computer screen in the bedroom. And so it wasn't in this very public facing sort of situation. Maybe also streaming plays a part in that, right? Like, I mean, streaming's been around for several years now, but it's easier to overlook something like people are making original content and putting it into this game when they're not streaming it out to millions of people to see. And I think for a company like Nintendo, part of it is like we can't control everything, but we want to control our public image as much as possible. If you're doing this more in the shadows, we'll kind of overlook it because maybe it's not directly affecting us as much. I know a friend of mine sent me a remake of Ocarina of Time somebody was doing in like Unreal Engine 5, and it was just like one little kind of brief snippet of it. And she was like, this looks amazing. Like, I wish they would actually put this out. I was like, that guy's going to get shut down as soon as Nintendo sees this.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he ever puts out this project. I don't even know if he's trying to redo the whole game, but like, there's no way it actually ever gets out. Whereas you kind of wish Nintendo would go, yeah, we'll just hire you to like make this for us.
Yeah.
So there's also some VR news this week. So let's see where to start with this. So Meta, which is Facebook, I feel like calling Facebook Meta is like calling Twitter X.
That's always going to be Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
So Meta is opening this is the first time I've heard this term. So I think this is the first time they're branding it this way. The Meta Horizon OS up to third-party developers. So what they're basically doing is saying, hey, the Meta system is an OS, and anybody can build a VR headset and run our OS on it, which theoretically would mean like you build the hardware and they will still be supplying the software. So if you want to play a VR game, you'd still be buying it from Meta, even though somebody else built the hardware. But they have some people who are interested. So the Republic of Gamers, Asus is their gaming brand is supposedly building a headset. One would think that would be maybe in some way a more powerful headset than the Meta Quest 3 that's already out there, because otherwise, why are you doing it? But one of the other companies they've teamed with is Microsoft with the Xbox, but not in the fun way that you think they would do it. So this is not that it's not Microsoft building a VR headset to work with the Xbox. This is instead an Xbox branded Meta Quest headset.
What?
So the image that they show is a black and green headset, and it's going to come with an Xbox controller. And so, one of the things that, like, theoretically you could do with this is then like stream Xbox games and play them in virtual reality. So you're playing Halo Infinite on a 100-inch screen in your virtual reality environment.
Oh my gosh.
So, it's interesting that they're doing this, but like, I don't know where this goes for them long term. Like, I mean, the ideal seems to be, hey, the problem with VR is not enough people are playing VR. Not enough people have bought headsets. Not enough people are interacting with those headsets on a regular basis. We need to get VR out there more. Our competition is not a different VR headset. It's public awareness and public interest.
And public dollars.
Well, yeah. I mean, VR is an expensive proposition. Is it an expensive proposition in addition to the idea that you would own another console?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if the VR headset's the only thing you're going to own, it's maybe not that expensive, but like most people are going to own a Switch or a PlayStation before they buy a VR headset. So speaking of which, they have lowered the price of the Meta Quest 2. So this is the older headset. They've lowered the price on it to $199. So I think we may have mentioned this before, but like, Mario, you had sent that thing that some Sam's Clubs were selling this as cheap as $99. Target had this for $199 with a $50 gift card. Seems like there's some really good deals out there. It is older hardware. It's not the brand new hardware. But this is what I have at home. It still works for games. It's a pretty decent little headset. That seems like a decent price. But
it makes you think that maybe this becomes a reasonable entry point for most people to sort of get into VR. I think that that's been a barrier, is just how to get into it and the price point.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you'll start to see, not to the extent of like a console or obviously like a television or a computer or something like that, but if it starts to become more of a commonplace household item.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can look at this and say, okay, a PS5 is $500, a MetaQuest 2 is $199. Like, that is a big difference.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is. Even the Switch for the full Switch is still like $300, right? Like, I guess the Lite is $200. But yeah, it's weird because, like, if that's the big push, right, to get people into this, then you are pushing them into older hardware. Yeah. So this would be like Sony saying, well, the PlayStation 5 is $500, but we're going to take the PlayStation 4 and mark it down to $150, which is what companies used to do. Like when they moved on to the next generation of hardware, they take the old hardware and price it down to like $100.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of people who were one console generation behind at all times.
That was my family.
Yeah, because it was just a more affordable way, and the games were cheaper too, right?
And they still released backwards compatible systems for further on things, but they also did a lot more of like parallel release where, we're going to release this for the PS2 and PS3.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, FIFA and Just Dance and like those games got released for like a decade after like the new consoles came out.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, unless something is basically like a launch title, it's for this system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that's what it feels like a lot of the times.
Yeah, so I mean, if somebody wanted to get into VR, I don't know what I would recommend to them because, the MetaQuest 2 is perfectly adequate, to borrow a phrase from Mario. It's like perfectly adequate, but also how long are they going to support this?
Sure.
So one of the things they are doing is they have dropped support for the MetaQuest 1. So they have told developers they cannot make their software run on MetaQuest 1 anymore. So new games coming out can no longer function with the MetaQuest 1. They can't, when they release it, they can't include that functionality.
What was the original name of that? There's a headset that I have in my mind. It's on like the tip of my tongue.
So there's the Oculus Rift.
That's the one that I'm thinking of.
But the Oculus Rift was their PC. So the Quest is their standalone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of, and there's the problem, like they used to be the Oculus, right? And then now they're Meta and they're just under the Meta label.
Because I knew there's it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing, basically.
Right. Yeah. So that was their PC headset, which now they've moved exclusively. I don't think they're developing any PC headsets anymore. It's all these standalone headsets that can connect to your PC. So they work. But this also ties into Meta's Reality Labs, which is who researches and develops this hardware and some of the software, has lost $3.85 billion in the first quarter of the year.
I can't even fathom that number.
That's wild.
So you remember that this is also tied into their idea of this metaverse, right? Remember they were developing the metaverse?
Yeah.
And that was the future of Facebook. So much so that they changed the corporate name from Facebook to Meta. That obviously has gone nowhere.
Yeah.
So I think part of those losses tie back into that. In more bad news for VR, I suppose, Apple has supposedly lowered the Vision Pro production and sales expectations for this year. And along with that, canceled the second version of the Vision Pro that was supposedly rumored to come out in 2025. Now, unlike this information about Meta, we should say all this Apple information is rumored. Like, none of this is confirmed. Apple hasn't said any of this. They never confirmed a second headset was coming out next year. They haven't even released the first Vision Pro in a lot of international territories. It's really just been an American release. So I think we should take this with a big grain of salt, but it's a $3,500 headset.
Yeah.
They are, we just know they're not selling nearly as many as Meta is selling of a $200 to $400 headset, right? Like, I cannot afford a $35. I went to an Apple store in Chicago and touched one of these Vision Pro headsets,
and they charged you $400 for it.
They would charge me $50 just to breathe the same air as it. But I don't have $3,500 to spend on this. Like, and even if I did, like, there's so many other things I would spend $3,500 on before this.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to justify, this. And I think Apple knew that going in. I think when people are making these claims like, oh, well, Apple's really disappointed, I don't think Apple's stupid enough to think that people are going to buy this over, you could buy a laptop and an iPad and a phone for the same price. Like, you could be completely outkitted with Apple product for the same price as this.
Yeah.
So, like, they had to know it was a very limited market.
In many ways, they'd probably rather you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, then you're completely in the ecosystem, right? Like, you buy the watch and the phone and the laptop, like, you're in.
Yeah.
And they know they're going to get money out of you at that point.
It just makes me continue to wonder, like, who this was for in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the speculation was that this was always meant as a developer kit. This was always meant to get it out to people so they could start developing software, and that at some point in the future, right, they would develop a cheaper version that they would sell to actual human beings.
Okay.
And we've seen some of it. So, like, I know there's been some stuff like car races where, like, some of the people broadcasting these car races, like, have come up with software where, like, there's a model of the track you can look at the same time you can watch the broadcasts, and at the same time you get, like, a listing of what place everyone is in. And, like, some of that software looked really cool. But, like, first off, it's not $3,500 cool. But, like, second off, am I going to put on a headset to watch a car race?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or to watch a golf tournament? Like, I like sports, but I don't know that I want to wear a headset to watch sports.
We also just think about, like, as a big sports fan, the community aspect of it. Like, unless there's a way to, like, jack into the system where you're, in an ecosystem with all of your friends who are also watching the same race or game as you.
Yeah.
But,
well, you can do the chat where you, like, see the person's face floating in the air in front of you.
Well, but even, like, I think about, I'm not much of a sports fan, but I think about, like, concerts and that where, like, people are, artists would have to say, like, put your phones away and be in the present moment here rather than living it through a screen. Like,
right.
If you're at a football game or a golf tournament or something and you're putting on a headset, like,
dude, imagine 10 years from now Super Bowl parties where we're all just wearing our headsets.
it'll be like those headphone club nights.
But, like, I mean, I think that's a good point because, like, sports are often a communal act, right? Like, watching sports, like, either in person at the stadium or at home. Like, you watch, at the Super Bowl, you have a Super Bowl party. You invite people over. Is everybody going to throw on a headset? That's weird. But I guess I would argue maybe not that much weirder than the fact that people are watching the Super Bowl all looking down at their phone and, like, live posting on social media about what the commercial that was just on or what just happened in the game. They just showed Taylor, right? Like, so everybody's, like, posting. I saw tons of people post about that. Like, I was so happy when they showed Taylor. Oh, look, she's like, she's so proud of her man winning. And
I knew people who had betting pools on how many Taylor shots there would be per quarter.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, maybe Apple has slowly like prepared us for this dark future. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of continues the news. Like we talked about, I think last week, the PlayStation VR 2 and like kind of its impending doom. It seems like VR is cool, but it's obviously not cool enough. It has never taken off in the way that the people behind it, and I think a lot of people in the industry thought it would, or hoped it would. Maybe hope is better than they actually believed it. Yeah. So last bit of news here. Atari is reviving the Infogrames brand. So Infogrames is so at one point Infogrames bought the Atari name and renamed themselves Atari. And then put out a bunch of crappy games and further sullying the Atari name, as has been done for decades now. Now, the new Atari has bought the Infogrames name.
And they're going to rename themselves.
Well, they're not renaming themselves. They'll still have the Atari brand. They're going to have Infogrames as a separate brand. Which is...
It's the vicious cycle.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. So this is interesting. I mean, Infogrames, if you're of a certain age, I think that name carries some weight to it and that sort of games that they used to put out. But, I mean, these are the people who made the original Alone in the Dark, right?
Yeah, I think for me, the games I most think of is Infogrames bought Humongous Entertainment, which did like all of the backyard sports games and like the Freddy Fish and the Putt Putts and all of those of the world.
That's where I've heard it. Okay.
And so I think there's like a big nostalgia. I mean, we're talking earlier about like sort of generational differences for different generations of game players. They're thinking of different games, but I think it is exciting. Nostalgia is a powerful selling tool.
Yeah, and I don't know if they still own those properties for like the Putt Putt Goes to the Parade and stuff like that.
I believe they do.
So like I guess you could see a future where they are making new games in those franchises.
Putt Putt in the style of God of War.
Well, I'm just thinking, so like Mario, you grew up with those games. So what is stopping them from making a new game? Because when you have kids, if you have kids or something like, right, that generation, now it would be a nostalgia play.
Well, that to me, we've talked about this a number of times, so we don't need to get into it. When we talked about the sports arcade games, like to me, the backyard sports games were always so great because they had like their original cast of kids that were in the games, and then certain editions of the games, every year would have like a roster of like the all-stars. So it would have, Barry Bonds and Ichiro and Ken Griffey Jr. It didn't have all of them, but it had the players that your kids would know. And same thing with the football games and the basketball games. And so like I said, we don't need to get into that conversation again because we've had it multiple times on the podcast of sort of sports arcade games. But that to me is just another way of providing a sports-based game for people that don't want the simulation that basically Madden has turned into.
And probably that makes more sense today where you could make that game and sell it digitally for $20, $30, right? It doesn't have to be a full $60, $70 release, which, in the time period you're talking about, like games had to be full retail releases.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can make that smaller backyard game.
And I think that those are the players that people want to play as. You want to play as Shohei Ohtani or Mike Trout or Bryce Harper, the big names in the sport, and the random second baseman that nobody knows on your favorite team. It's like you love him because he's on your favorite team, but like the general fan doesn't, they don't think about that player. And so it's one of those things where you don't have you still obviously have to have the license, but you don't have to have, I don't know how that all works, but I think it would be an angle worth investigating, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I imagine they're not getting the Major League Baseball license. They're going out and licensing individual players with them for that.
They did, I think, have the Major League Baseball license because you could be like the Giants or the Rangers or whatever, insert team here. But you wouldn't necessarily have to do that.
Right. Well, I mean, and that would be really interesting. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, like the NBA 2K games, right, have added the WNBA for several seasons. Mm-hmm. So like this year, all of a sudden, you have this new crop of players coming out of college, led by Caitlin Clark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, you know, there's obviously like Reese and other people. And so you have these women coming into the sport who are like sort of household names at this point.
Have like legit and real star power.
Right. And so obviously that's going to be a big deal for NBA 2K. But yeah, if you're going to do this backyard sports game, right? You do backyard sports basketball, there's nothing that's prohibiting you from putting women in it.
I think Lisa Leslie was in the first one.
Okay. Well, there you go. So
and it's always been sort of a, mixed gender games where you'd have the same way you'd see kids at a park playing a game of baseball or softball or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like I said, I know the basketball games, I want to say the first one had Lisa Leslie in it. The soccer games had like Brianna Scurry and Brandy Chastain and Mia Hamm in them. And so, yeah, there's that angle as well, for sure.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I'd be really shocked if somebody didn't try to lean in and take advantage of that. No pun intended with the lean in, but like really try to take advantage of that star power. Like they would be stupid not to. Mm-hmm. Like while it's still hot, right? All right, that does it for news. So let's move on to our big question. We already recounted our merry adventures at IHOP this morning, so it did get us thinking: which restaurant should team up with a game franchise next? So IHOP with Sonic the Hedgehog. What restaurant would you like to see team up with a game franchise next? And Alicia, why don't we just start with you?
Let the record show that I wrote down my answer before we started recording the podcast.
Is this a Denny's answer?
Fallout is massive right now. We've got to capitalize on that and do a collab of post-apocalyptic, still standing Denny's.
When everything has gone wrong in your world, you come to Denny's, where you can enjoy where everything has gone wrong for the Fallout world.
Bottle caps not accepted as payment. Oh, man, because there's so many fun things you could do. You could do a dog meat burger. Like your dog from Fallout 4.
I've never played a Fallout game in my life. I don't know any of the references or jokes. I wrote that before we started talking, and then the whole time we were talking about Denny's, I was like, Alicia, don't spoil your answer to the big question.
That's a good one. That would work quite well. Mario, how about you?
So it's a little specific. In the Bay Area, there's a sandwich chain called Ike's, and there they have like all of the sandwiches are named after either like local things or like local celebrities. So a lot of like their sandwiches named after 49ers players or Giants players and stuff like that. And so because they're named after people, I feel like you could get Ike's to pair with Fire Emblem with the main character of Ike for Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, and you just get a ton of new sandwiches of all of the Fire Emblem characters.
I thought you were going to do like a San Francisco Rush sandwich.
Oh, no.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I feel like that's prime real estate, right? So many game developers are out there, so like so many games are set in that area. You could do like a driver sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. I like the Ike. Yeah, so my thought was, what would work with McDonald's? What should McDonald's do? And then I decided Mr. Do is a clown. So Ronald is a clown. So what if you had like Mr. Do and Ronald McDonald like in a fight right? Like, and that's the like promotion and everything. And so like, it could be like Raw versus SmackDown, and they could do a draw, like which menu items each one gets.
They get the draft for
Yeah. And like,
Do we get the other McDonald's? Do we get the Hamburglar? Do we get all of them?
McDonald's needs to lean back into the weird characters
They
that
do.
they had.
And hey, some of
I mean,
those,
they did it with Grimace,
Yeah.
but
yeah, and some of those characters are really weird. Like, I don't know, like there's characters that you probably don't remember because they like disappeared, but like there are really weird characters in the lore of McDonald Land. Like everybody like laughs about Grimace, and you're like, no, Grimace is like one of the more normal ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I like that idea of like a draft, and like, you know, like Mr. Dude gets McNuggets. So like, what is Ronald going to take? And he's like, oh, I guess I'll take the Big Mac. And he's like, oh, big mistake, Ronald. And then, you know, like Ronald takes the milkshake, and he's like, you'll never get one because it's broken all the time. In my mind, Mr. Do is just antagonistic at all times. So yeah, that's our big question for the week. That's our episode for the week. Thank you, as always, Alicia and Mario. And thank you for joining me this morning for breakfast. That was a nice hearty breakfast to start off our day. I think we're also all a little wired because we had sugar this morning for breakfast.
Oh, see, I'm on the sugar crash.
I think I think Alicia and I have been yawning this whole episode.
Well,
I'm on the sugar crash.
Well, then even worse, right? Like being tired and then like injecting your body full of sugar from pancakes and everything. And yeah, so like the two of them will probably pass out immediately, maybe before they even get out of this room.
Oh, I had hopes of I was joking when we were there of, you know, like, oh, I'm leaving my house for breakfast, and then I gotta go home, and I gotta leave my house again. And I was like, well, I'll just go to campus and I'll work. That did not happen. I went back home.
Yeah, I came back to campus and I sat in my car for 20 minutes, and then I finally was like, I need to go inside and like do my homework.
Okay, you two are worse off than me, and I thought I was pretty bad this week. So yeah, that does it for this week. Thanks for listening. You can check out more at salukigames.com. We'll be back next week with a new episode. It's finals week, so we're probably going to be even worse next week, or it's the final week of class, then finals week. So we'll probably be even
next
worse.
Week.
Yeah, well, yes, we will all be dead by the end of the week. So you have that to look forward to. Thanks for listening. We'll be back.